I was about 8 when I started welding, living in the country, and we're a blue-collar family, right? Mom and Dad didn't see the point in going to the Honda dealer and spending $4,500 on a four-wheeler when he could go buy a 76 Chevy pickup truck for $50 from the guy out on the highway, and that's his go-kart now, you know.
This episode of the Fabricator Podcast is brought to you by Miller Electric. Welders make their impact one weld at a time, leaving a piece of themselves in every finished project. Miller supports and fuels their passions with machines, technology, and safety equipment to meet the ever-evolving needs of manufacturers, fabricators, construction workers, and artists. Because it's not just about welding, it's about fostering new ideas and inspiring the next generation. Go to millerwelds.com to learn more.
Hello, this is Dan Davis of the Fabricator Magazine, joined by Josh Welton of Brown Dog Welding. We're here at the SEMA show, thanks to Miller Electric, our partners in this event, and we thank them for providing us some space to do this at the SEMA show. This episode, we'll be talking to Ryan Fielding of Ringbrothers.
Super interesting guy.
Yeah, they do some introduction. I shouldn't say not introductions, but make some cars for this event every year, and this year is no different. Some pretty cool stuff. One of which is a '69 Dodge Charger, and I know that's right up your alley.
Yeah, it is.
Is there like a car that is maybe out there you haven't driven you'd love to drive?
I mean, I wouldn't mind getting a taste of some supercars just to get a feel for how they. I mean, just lightweight, big engine, different exotic motors types.
Driving in a straightaway or like a circuit course?
Anything.
Yeah.
I like driving on the street. Like, you can't do it too crazy, but you can get kind of crazy.
Yeah, and you've done a little bit of that with some of the stuff.
Yeah, I like road tripping stuff. I'm not a big I'm not big into racing. Like, I like going fast, but I'm not necessarily in the competitive kind of thing.
Right.
A car that I have driven that would be up there is my friend Ralph Giles has a '68 Charger, full carbon fiber body, Speed Core built it. Hell of an engine, 1,000, 1,300 horsepower, whatever it happens to be when they tune it certain ways. But we took that, Ralph and I took it on part of the Hot Rod Power Tour.
Oh,
so
wow.
I drove like 1,200 miles of it, and that car is so slick.
Yeah.
They were talking about, Ryan ends up talking about 3D printing parts for the cars, and like all the knobs were 3D printed, aluminum, or not aluminum, but like titanium.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just everything that, like, even the system they did for the sound system, it's on a tray that's like super secure, so it doesn't rattle at all. And then you can pull it out and you can access all your electronics in the trunk. So like, it does everything well, and plus it's full carbon fiber, which you just don't see people driving those on the road. I like driving things on the road that other people wouldn't, or like doing things that other people wouldn't, like driving the ACR Viper out here for SEMA a few years back. Like, that was dumb, but it was awesome. Like, nobody else is stupid enough to do that, but I did it because.
Does it sadden you that some of the big three or car makers in general aren't doing some of those, not one-offs, but aspiration type projects like they used to?
They still do. So like, if you visit like in Detroit, or around Detroit, Chrysler has a museum with packed full of old concept cars, or like even recent ones. Like, they build Jeeps for Moab. So basically their company builds, and then they hold on to them for marketing or whatever else. But they still do those, but they're more functional, because back in the day you couldn't make crazy stuff functional in that amount of time. And also, it was a thing to see how people would react to it.
Right.
And there was so much time consumed in that. Whereas now, because of technology and building on their own platforms that they already have. Like, back in the day, they actually used to build certain concept cars on like a neon platform, because that chassis was just easy to move cars around with.
Right.
Now everything's functional, and they could get more bang for their buck doing something. If people look at it and are like, oh, that's real, then that adds a ton of value.
Walking around SEMA, you see other people's.
Totally inspiring.
Yeah. Whereas,
good and bad.
There's
a lot of bad.
But
there's a lot of everything.
Yeah. I think sometimes change is not always good. So,
Not always.
Yeah.
And some people, they're like, want to do something unique, but just because it's unique doesn't mean it looks good.
Right.
Or functions well. But
That's kind of fun, though.
it is fun. And it's cool to see. It's even cool to see builders grow at the show, because I've been going here for over a decade and seeing someone who like just had a truck outside, now they got a booth inside or whatever, you know, like, and the level of workmanship in the vehicles. I think they were getting called because everything here is exposed and everyone's got a camera and everyone's dissecting everything.
Right.
And I think enough people got embarrassed by like having really shoddy welds on a 6-figure car that they try not to do that as much anymore.
Right. And you have people with some real expertise walking this.
Yes.
walking
Yeah,
this show.
you got some of the best fabricators in the world rocking here. You know, obviously Fab Tech, which is more niche. That's like, we call it Fabricator Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Here is just like a whole. It's hard to explain because it's not a. It's a car show that's not a car show. It's a trade show that's not a trade show.
Right. Fabricating expert, car nerds, engineers. You got all kind of people.
Everything, everyone. You know, the big three is usually well represented here. Ford pulled out and then Chrysler pulled out this year. Ford pulled out last year. I think because of the growth of the show, everything's become so expensive that the rate on return changes.
Yeah.
The return on investment changes. It is inspirational to see. Like on the way in, we just got stopped by a couple of overlanding vehicles that were like, "Oh, that's a cool idea. We could do that."
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun like that.
Yeah.
And just making connections.
Oh, yeah. And I think you'll find, or at least hear some of that inspiration coming from Ryan as we talk
100%.
with him. The 3 cars that not only the Charger, but a Ford Mustang and a Rolls-Royce.
The Rolls-Royce is so sick.
Which is, you know, from a standpoint, you see a Rolls-Royce, you appreciate its
elegant,
luxurious. But there's a lot of story. We were chatting about the performance of the car, so it's
well, they changed a lot about the performance of that car,
and actually took it drag racing
and beat one of the brand new Rolls Royces, which are not slouches either. So at an airport, I've always wanted to race on an airport drag strip. So
I've always wanted to chase after a European terrorist taking off in a jet.
Yeah,
at
and
an
then
airport.
like running your car into their landing gear, and then they crash and burn, and you're the hero. I get it.
Yes, unfortunately, my four-banger Impreza won't go that fast. So anyway. Enjoy this episode of the Fabricator Podcast. Thanks to Miller Electric again, our partner in this event, and enjoy.
Every job deserves Miller quality. That's why the new Miller-Matic 142 makes professional quality MIG welds easy. Miller's newest portable MIG welder is fast and simple to set up, has a high duty cycle, and can run on generator power. Everything you expect from a Miller MIG welder. Give every job you weld, no matter its size, pro-quality results with the Miller-Matic 142. Learn more at millerwelds.com. Now's a good time to mention that we offer sponsorship opportunities for the podcast. Amy Hudson, Senior Account Executive, is here to give us a quick overview.
Yes, we have 2 sponsorship levels. The first has logo placement, some ad read-ins. The second option that we're really excited about is definitely kind of cool, where you can bring in a customer and kind of tell the problem solution story that way.
Great. So to get all the details, please go to thefabricator.com/advertise, or you can contact your sales rep directly. And now back to the episode.
We're at the SEMA show in Vegas. Special guests of our partners, Miller Electric. We thank them for having us in their booth. And Ryan, thanks for joining us.
You bet. Glad to be here.
This is a big deal for y'all, right?
It's always a big deal for us, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, SEMA's where it's at. You know, every year we look forward to, unveiling the cars that we've tried to keep under wraps all year. And we finally get to share the pictures, share the stories, and it's real exciting. It's always down to the last minute, and this year was no exception.
100% every year.
Yeah, no exception. We had 2 totally ready, and the Charger that's in our booth over there. We had the dually running, the trailer door open, garage door open, Jim in the driver's seat, and me and a couple of the guys were putting the last of the interior panels in, and it went into the trailer and headed west.
That's awesome.
So
now, how long have y'all been doing cars and unveiling them here at SEMA?
This, it's got to be for Mike and Jim. I mean, they got to be over 15 years of coming to SEMA.
Yeah. And how long have you been with the Ringbrothers?
So I've been with Ringbrothers 3 years.
Okay.
I had my own shop for just under 20 years before Mike called me up and convinced me to hang a closed sign on my own shop and come build with cars with him. So
Awesome.
Yeah. That's kind of neat, kind of doing your own thing and then kind of joining up with some other folks.
Absolutely. You know, we had talked about it for years, right? So we were only a half an hour apart.
Right.
We actually went to the same high school.
No kidding.
They were ahead of me by, a number of years, but we knew each other, and, I'd always stop in and see what they're up to, and we'd run into each other during hunting season and such, and always talk about, what both of us are up to, and kind of always kicked around the idea of getting together sometime on something. And the opportunity presented itself here a few years ago, and like I said, I hung that close sign, put my shop into a couple semi-trailers, and brought it down to Ringbrothers. So it's been excellent.
Very cool. I need one of those shirts.
We can make it happen.
I love that shirt.
That's awesome. So cars this year, can you talk about some of the ones that have been produced?
So we brought a Rolls-Royce 61 Silver Cloud, 65 Mustang Convertible, and a 65 Mustang Convertible, and a 69 Dodge Charger.
Yeah.
The Rolls definitely a departure for us. We'd never done a Rolls. Really hadn't done anything.
Really didn't mess too much with the body.
We
right?
really didn't. Yeah.
That's my favorite thing about. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
but
you're good.
What you guys do is there's not like a single focus vehicle. Like you're all over the board with brands, with types, with styles. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
From Winnebagos to Rolls Royces.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and that it keeps it exciting in the fab shop, right?
100%.
So we always have something totally different going, and then we have like the Mustang. Obviously we're kind of known for Mustangs. We've done a lot of them. So that's always great because we can try new things, right? Every car you do, after you're done, you look at it and you love it. It's great. But maybe we should have this, or maybe we should have that, or and you can take all those things, and then when you inevitably do the next one, you can put those ideas into it, right? And everything you do, each one should get better than the last. Like that's always the idea, right? If you start going the other direction, that's a problem. So, trying to stay innovative, come up with new products, and come up with new ideas on how to go about, the builds that we do is fun. But yeah, with that Rolls-Royce, we hadn't done anything like that. We didn't really do any body mods. Rolls-Royce builds a hell of a car as it is.
Right.
So we didn't have to do much styling-wise, and not for nothing, we didn't want to take away any of the Rolls-Royce styling that it has, but we cleaned up everything we could and just refined some of those lines. Yeah. But where we really changed the game on a Rolls-Royce is everything you don't see, right? Chassis, drivetrain, interior, that sort of thing, and suspension, just all of those components. Just it makes it a hell of a car.
It's kind of neat to have like an American handprint on something
absolutely
extremely European English.
I just watched the drag race video last night.
Yeah,
that was super cool.
Oh, that was a lot of fun. So we drag race the two Rolls Royces, and it was funny. So the idea was, of course, ours needed to win, right? Yeah. There wasn't a choice. Like we're like, okay, maybe we need to back off on the new one a little bit, and but there was no backing off. They're both hammered down, and
that's awesome.
The new one couldn't catch ours, so that was pretty great.
That's awesome.
It's got to be so weird to hop in a vehicle like that and be like, oh, this does this.
Yeah, no, it's wild. You get in, that car's 21 feet long or thereabouts,
right?
And it's refined and elegant and classy, and it's relatively quiet, right?
Yeah.
But it's got cutouts. You step on it, and that LT4 lights up, and you hear that supercharger whistle, those exhaust cutouts open up, and then it's a rocket ship. That's really funny. Is. And it's got table manners. I mean, it handles beautifully. Roadster shop chassis, independent suspension.
Right.
And the wheel and tire setup that's on there, they're not enormous, but they're definitely a much larger footprint than what it would have had.
It looks like it should
right?
look. Like it looks perfect.
Yeah. Right.
Like that car wouldn't have looked right if we tubbed it and put these giant tires in the back. But I mean, there's a good footprint there, and that goes to the handling and that thing will turn, will corner, and you don't get a lot of body rock. It's really interesting in a car that big.
Yeah.
You expect to have a big swale when you turn, and you really don't. So it's a fun car to drive.
That's cool.
Yeah. And the owner's great, and he's just so excited to get it and get driving it. He was there when we shot that
That's
airport
right
video, and he was just all smiles.
That's cool.
He thought that was really neat.
There's a payoff right there. That's incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Immortalized. So the Mustang itself, it's funny, we were talking about like luxury. I see that car and it makes me think of like a cool 70s like den in a home.
Yeah.
With leather furniture.
Yeah, like the drop-in living room.
It's a moment in time almost that y'all created there.
Absolutely.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, so Steve from Upholstery Unlimited did the interior in that car, and that tan or camel color against that red. It's one of my favorite color combinations, to be honest.
Right.
I think it just looks good and everything, but specifically what he did. And we had, I don't know if you noticed, but so like those door panels, those are 3D printed. That console was 3D printed, and then he wrapped them in leather, and we Cerakoted some of the components. So that gave it, that was something we hadn't really explored too much. So, we might build those panels in aluminum or something. Those particular ones on the Mustang were 3D printed.
Wow.
And then, we built the structure surrounding them all with, aluminum or sheet metal. But the printed components were then wrapped in leather by Steve. And of course, then he did the seats and built the bolsters. I mean, you get in that car and it's like sitting on a couch. It's
right.
It's great.
Nice.
That's awesome. I'm going to let Mr. Mopar ask about the Dodge.
So I was actually trying to watch video of it last night, and the YouTube kept freezing up. So you tell me about your Dodge.
About the Dodge, the Charger. So the car's name is Tusk.
69?
69 Charger, named Tusk. It's got a Elephant in it.
Nice.
T56 6-speed.
Yeah.
So like most of our builds, we don't want to change so much that it doesn't look like what it is, right? And that was important with this car, but we wanted to change enough things to make it, a Ringbrothers
100%.
car, right?
Yeah.
So
there's that balance. It's I do the same thing with my art. Is like people are like, oh, that's so detailed. It's like, not really. It's your eyes telling you. So you pick out those few things that make a car, or a truck, and like you can't. Those are the immutable things.
Absolutely. And it's really cool. So we had a number of people in the booth looking at the car and talking to them, and there was two guys specifically that had 69 Chargers. So it's really cool to talk to guys like that when they're looking at the car, because they start picking out those things that we changed by a 1/4 inch, we changed by an inch. The fact that we welded this piece of trim together where normally it would have a separation. And most people look past that, right? Because what you're going for is not necessarily, obviously there's some things that immediately draw your attention, but you don't want that to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Where you're
too busy. You can't have it too busy.
Yeah. So you want some of those things, you don't notice it because it's so right.
Yep.
And that's what we always shoot for. So that Charger, two of the big things we did, and there's a lot of them, but the ones that really stick out, right? So on the side, the 69 on the door had kind of two indentations that mimicked like a scoop, or they were in the front of the door there.
Yep.
So
the scallops kind of.
Yeah. So we got rid of those, made a whole new door skin, and just continued those body lines all the way to the front of the door. And then in the fender, we made new fender sides. So from that top body line down, we made that new, and we put functional scoops that were, that same shape and size that were in the door, but they're actually CNC machined billet aluminum scoops that are functional, and they draw air from the wheel well and come out right there.
I'm looking forward to go checking that out.
Yeah,
right after
super
this.
cool. And we sunk those into the fender. We moved the engine back 3 inches from where it was set up to be, and we moved the wheelbase forward 2 inches. Wow. So the handling, we really haven't had a chance to drive that car. Like I said, we got it together right before we came here.
It's a heavy freaking engine.
Yeah, but having it back like that, I think it's going to handle really great, and I'm excited to to get some miles on it.
Somebody who's actually used to handling a 69.
Yeah,
and how it compares.
To see how it compares. Absolutely.
That's kind of exciting.
Then in the hood, so carbon fiber hood. There's really not all that many carbon fiber components on that car, but we got a carbon fiber hood, carbon fiber grill. But that hood, we had to get around the Elephant, of course, right? It's a tall motor with that supercharger up on top. We got it down as far as we could, but we still needed room for, everything that goes with that supercharger. And we've got two big CNC machined scoops that mimic what's in the fender, but they're sitting like this in the hood.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of a cowl that turns into these two aluminum scoops, and they're good sized. And then in the front, we Mike and myself and Sean in the fab shop, we were looking at it one night, and if 69 Chargers, they have that grill surround is plastic, and they all kind of dip because they had only a few fastening points on the top, and that section would tighten up, and in between them they would dip. and there's really nothing you can do about it. The repops are even worse. So we're like, the only way around is to do it in carbon. So we decided that night that we were going to do it in carbon. We scanned it and it made a grill surround in carbon. Once we had that, then we decided that the grill trim, which was 7 pieces.
Print the carbon?
No, that was laid by Gemini.
Okay, cool,
Yep,
cool.
Yep. So they made a mold and laid it. Then there's chrome trim that went around that grill surround, and that was originally 7 pieces. So you had like your ends, and then 2 flats here and here, and then that centerpiece, and that was like stamped stainless or stamped aluminum. And the way they lay over, just you can't make them look good.
Right.
Even if you weld it together, like at the end of the day, it's stamped thin metal. So we decided to machine that.
You're going all out on a build.
Yeah.
You gotta find those little things like that.
And that one was a challenge for the guys in the machine shop. So we started with, between the fixture and the part itself, 538 thereabout pounds of billet.
Wow.
Whittled down to 2.3 pounds for that one-piece grill surround trim that we then had AIH Chrome down in Dubuque did the chrome plating on it, and they did all the chrome on the car and did an excellent job like they always do. But that was quite the piece.
Yeah.
There
Sounds like it.
and, because it's so right. It's like this, but it's this long.
It's so
and,
crazy how sometimes it's the littlest detail that costs so much time and money to get right.
Yeah. Between design and then just figuring it out and materials and runtime on the machines.
Machining,
We figured back in the day just to mass produce stuff like that. It was just
with tape measures and stunts, not even like pencils and I love seeing those old guys. You see the drafting rooms at the Big Three back in the day, and it's just like a bunch of guys smoking pipes with these huge drafting boards, like drawing things out to scale. And
no, it's wild. It's wild, and it's obviously the technology that is at our fingertips now. 3D printing,
it's incredible.
Just for prototyping, right? And we utilize that so often where we'll be able to look at something, say the exhaust tips on that car, on the Charger. So we're looking at it, decided on kind of what we wanted the shape to be, drew up just a piece of cardboard and kind of drew it out of like, about this big and about this shape. Took it to the guys over in the machining building. They modeled it in SolidWorks, 3D printed it. Like the next day I had a 3D printed exhaust tip that we did in 3 pieces, 1 piece welds to the exhaust, the center section bolts to that, and then the outer section in the future, we can make whatever we want. Like it can be different.
Yeah.
So we can use it in the future. But anyway, within a couple days of having the idea, here's 2 3D printed ones that you can bolt into the car and go, let's make it a little smaller.
We live in a wild time.
Yeah, versus you'd have to make it all the way through. Previously, and it's
have to change it here, change it there, redo a bunch of stuff.
Do you feel tempted to try to do more like intricate, more detailed type changes to cars? Because you have access to all this technology?
Absolutely. That's, like on, say, those scoops where the way that they sit, we try to, nothing we do is flat or necessarily has right angles. Everything can be smoothed and rounded and have just a slight curve to it. So like those scoops, you don't see it at first glance, but if they weren't slightly arched, you'd know it because they'd look too flat against that rounded fender. Right. So you can, when you're modeling it, and they can just make that arch just go up by 30,000.
Dial it in.
Yeah, so you can really dial it in, and then tool paths, like on those we left the tool paths in parts of it, and and painted through them so you can see that it was done that way, and those guys can make that tool path whatever they want, and have them go with the lines of the car, and that's kind of what we did on that one.
That's dope.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's really great. It's just wonderful to have that access to that kind of technology.
Yeah,
and,
right on.
So you're a 3rd generation fabricator.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Did your family kind of influence what you wanted to do?
100%. So it all started with my grandfather. He was a professional stuntman, motorcycle rider, racer, and did circle track stuff. But he traveled with it was Jimmie Lynch and the Death Dodgers. They were
awesome.
Yeah, they were a traveling stunt show, and they did like state fairs and county fairs and that sort of thing. Mostly around the Midwest, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, that sort of thing. And they would do all this crazy stunt work, jumping over cars and that sort of thing. And then he met my grandma, and she said, "That's enough of that, no more." So then he had a welding shop, and he'd buy wrecked cars, and then fix them up and put them out front and try to sell them. And
oh wow!
Then that turned into he built trikes and hot rods and that sort of thing. And my father grew up at his knee, right, handing him tools and learning how to weld and sometimes wrecking some of those cars. And of course, then Dad went on and built hot rods. So my father will be 79 in May. He is just finishing up a 58 Ford.
Nice.
Which is pretty righteous. So he brought it down to Ringbrothers the other day. He just got it running. And it's pretty wild to see a almost 80-year-old man with long white hair, long white beard. His windshield's about this tall on that thing, and it's just hammered. And he's just loving it. So that's what I grew up with. It, my entire life, he was building something, right?
Right.
And my mother, was right there as well. She's extremely talented craftsperson and artist. So I grew up in that environment where being creative and being artistic was nurtured. It was funny. I was just telling Hunter a story that when I was in kindergarten, first grade, my folks would get progress reports and report cards talking about how Ryan doodles in the corners and this sort of thing.
And your mom's like, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was her thing, was like, well, did he get the work done? I'm like, yeah, but he's drawing, and he's like, fine, that's fine. Let me put it on the wall.
Freaking school system trying to make good little workers.
So I grew up in the country. My sister's a lot younger than I am, so for all intents and purposes,
in Wisconsin.
Yep. So my summers were spent out in the shop with Dad, or with Mother doing, she did sculpture and all sorts of different things that it's just invigorating and just a really cool environment to nurture being creative, right? So I grew up that way, and my father, he told me, when I got out of high school, he said, just be careful as far as like having my own shop, right? He said his advice was to keep it a hobby, because if you make it a career, it could turn into a job, right? Yeah. Because coming from a different generation, not for nothing, a lot of the customer base that we enjoy now didn't exist, right? That was tough going being an artist.
For sure. Yeah. The internet changed everything.
Absolutely everything. So I tried my hand. Went to college, and it just kept coming back. I was still building bikes and building cars. Yeah. And at some point, I was like, nope, I gotta get back to my roots, and quit the day job, started my shop, and now here we are, 20 odd years later. So
right on.
Wow.
Very cool. Wow. Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out right now. Is I like my day job, but it's gotten stale, and I feel like I'm just wasting time there. I really want to start. I want to do what I do full time, like on my own time, and that's the next leap. And it's always a difficult leap for people.
Absolutely. It's tough. Starting a business, it's no joke.
Because all you hear about is people saying how great it is, and it's like, I know so many people have failed at it, or it's been a pain in the butt for them. Yeah. And it's trying to find the timing is.
Yeah. And when I started, I even with the name that I had for my shop, I didn't pigeonhole myself into, I'm only going to do this one thing.
Right. Take on whatever pays the bills.
Absolutely. Yeah. The goal was always with what my father told me, to keep in mind that I need to do things that inspire me, that keep me like, I want to get there and do this.
I'm feeling this right now.
But at the end of the day, especially when you're starting out, like if you need to weld a snowplow for $100, you weld a snowplow for $100, right? You have until you get to the point where you're like, nope, don't have time for that because I'm doing this, that, or the other. Right. But what that allowed me to do was focus on a lot of different things, between metal sculpture, wrought iron, like railing work, where I did a couple pieces where I was commissioned to, like, we want a railing that does this, just make it cool, right? So I moved my whole welding shop. It was out at a winery. I moved my whole welding shop out there. He set me up with a 220 plug and my table, vices, hammers, everything, and I just sat out there and just
awesome.
made this railing, and that's what it was about, right? Like that's why I started this shop was, I'm here in this beautiful location up in the bluffs in Wisconsin, overlooking the river, and I've got months to build this.
It's incredible. That's awesome.
This cool railing, and that's led to so many different things, including here, SEMA 2023. That's
you just don't know what door is going to open when you
never know.
When you get into the trades, and welding particularly. Like, people joke about, like, since the start of Instagram, all these welders are not welding anymore. They're doing different things, and I'm like, yeah, it's not that they don't like welding anymore. They just found a niche that they could fit into. And whether it's sculpture, whether it's being a spokesperson or an influencer or whatever, or, making welding apparel. There's all these different things these people branch out into, and welding's still at the center of it.
Yeah. Do you think your skills from those early days kind of even help you nowadays?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So I remember I was about 8 when I started welding.
Yeah. That was one of my questions. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was about 8 years old, and the way that came about, so living in the country, and we're a blue collar family, right? Mom and Dad didn't see the point in going to the Honda dealer and spending $4,500 on a 4-wheeler when he could go buy a 76 Chevy pickup truck for $50 from the guy out on the highway. And that's his go-kart now.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we did. So that's exactly what my first truck was. And I was about 8 years old. And we took all the glass out. We put chicken wire, in the windshield, because I'm going to go out and hit trees and stuff, right? So he doesn't want a kid to get hurt. But I needed a guard on the back because I was going to use it to haul wood and brush and stuff, So Dad brought home a bunch of rebar and turned the stick welder on and figured it out. Figured it out. So I welded up this headache rack kind of deal with all rebar just all crossed up, and it wasn't long. I started gas welding because we didn't have TIG. It was my old man's still stick. I bought him a MIG and it just sits there. That 58 that he did, it's all stick welded.
Really?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and he was doing sheet metal work and stuff, and I with the MIG and nah, and he just 70-14 and just whatever works for you.
Yeah,
right. Sometimes they're not going to change.
Yeah, but so for me, when I got into doing a little bit more intricate stuff, again, I was real young, but I remember one of the pieces on a hot rod he was building, he needed a fill cap for the coolant that was just in line of the hose, right? Because for whatever reason, it couldn't be on the radiator and needed to get high enough.
Gotcha.
Whatever the deal was. And he was at it, and he's like, you do it. And he had me braze it, because I was getting to that point of, he's like, you can braze better than me, and that was, as a kid, I'm like, maybe there's something to this,
I love it.
So yeah, and then I didn't get a wire feed until I was, an adult. So out of the house. Otherwise,
it was stick welding everything, gas welding everything.
Stick and gas welding everything. And those skills, especially with TIG, right? At the end of the day,
translate.
Gas welding. If you can gas weld sheet metal, if you're doing a chop top or a patch repair or a cab corner, whatever it is, if you can do it there, those techniques are very similar,
100%,
right?
Yep.
Because you can finish out with hammer and dolly. You can finish a gas weld. You can finish a TIG weld. So I was doing finish work with that. Gas welds, and of course now we're doing finish work with the TIG.
Teaches you so much torch control too if you're doing that kind of work.
Yeah,
a lot.
Absolutely,
which comes in handy again with
and patience, right? You're not just hood down and just burning rod.
You're thinking about it the whole time.
You have to think about it and what it's doing to the panel, where that heat's going to go, where it's going to pull, where it's going to push. And
that kind of stuff gets locked away in your brain. So later on, I talk about, some people just can see lines in metal. They know what it's going to happen. I think a lot of that comes with that experience of doing a bunch of different things and knowing how the metal reacts to those things.
Yeah, 100%. And when you go to finish that metal, even if you're done putting heat to it, but if you've got a high spot or a low spot, you're generally not hitting on that spot. You're hitting around it to get it to do what you need it to do. And it's real interesting. It's real hard to teach. It's almost just, you just need to kind of know.
Yep.
You almost envision, if I hit it here, it's going to do this. So yeah, it's hard to teach those things that once you've been in the industry a while, just are second nature, right? So when you're working sheet metal, you don't really know what you need to be able to articulate it.
Yep.
You just kind of know where you
have a feel for the metal.
You just have a feel, and it's so hard to teach that. We try, with our new guys to give them all the tools that they could possibly have, but a lot of time it comes down to I really don't know either to tell you how to do it. I just need to kind of do it, and once I get it going and you can feel, right, you hit a couple times and you're like, yep, that's doing what I want it to, then you can pause and be like, all right, here's what I did and here's why it worked and here's what the metal's doing. And inversely, you can hit it a couple times and well, that's worse, and now you can have a conversation about how to correct that. But yeah, it's just a feel thing, and it's incredibly important to put those skills into the next generation, but it's also incredibly difficult to teach. So it's amazing the guys that really focus on education and teaching those skills, because it's so much by feel. And for them to be able to articulate, you know, the Ron Covels of the world,
Yeah.
to be able to articulate that sort of thing is really special.
Yeah, it's I like to. It's like they're metal whisperers.
Yeah.
You see the like I've tried to explain to people at work how I'm bending. Like, what are you gonna do to fix that? And I'm like, I'm not sure yet. I just kind of am gonna do it, and then it's gonna work. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. And you know, one of the things too that we'll tell, you know, somebody starting out is like, it's just metal, man.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
It's just metal.
100%.
Don't overthink it. Just if you feel like you need to bend it a little, like if you bend it over your knee, like cool, we got all fancy whatever.
Yes.
But if in your head it's like, well, if I just bend it over my knee, then just bend it over your knee.
Yep.
And if it fits, beautiful. Because you know that's sometimes what it takes.
Yeah.
I remember talking to is it Moose from Rad Rides by Troy?
Sure, yeah.
And I talked to him at a Detroit Autorama. He came up to one of my booths, and I was just talking about their builds, and I was like, I want to get some of that sheet metal machinery. He's like, dude, we just got that stuff. Everything we've built, it's been on a leather bag, and just like with stuff we had around the shop, like you just make it fit your vision. He's like, it takes longer, but at the end, it looks just as good.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. Like, okay,
Yeah.
you don't need the big, you know, the power hammer, the English wheel, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you just use what you have and make it work.
Yeah, and there's definitely a place for all that.
100%. Yeah,
But
totally.
to that point, we're the same way. One of the things that get used probably the most is we have probably like a 9 or 10 inch diameter piece of pipe that's welded to a giant bench, and it's separated from the bench, so it's like got standoffs on the ends, right?
Okay, yep.
But the middle, you can get back behind it, and more often than not, whatever the piece is, a trans tunnel or a wheel tub, like we start with
Clamp
stick it
it.
in there
Yeah.
and just push it down,
Yep.
and you pull it out and kind of do this, and like, all right, cool, and then what, cut it up, do whatever you're gonna do from there, versus slip rolls are great, and you can set
Now they got CNC slip rolls.
yeah,
and-
no, it's crazy, but yeah, more often than not, same thing. You're talking about the leather bag. I mean, that's still my go-to. It's I have a shelf under my bench, and it's always right there because so often, like, if I just hit it there,
Right.
it's gonna be where I need it to be. Pull that out, whack, hit
Sometimes
it.
Old school's the best school.
Yeah, one of my favorite hammers. I've had it since I started my first shop. It was a acetylene tank cap welded to a 2-inch piece of pipe with an electrical tape grip. And I built like my first, I don't know how many motorcycle gas tanks with that because it was the
Yeah,
shape
yep,
was
yep.
just perfect. And at that time I couldn't afford the teardrop, synthetic hammer heads and that sort of thing.
I've definitely used the tops of welding bottles to fab stuff.
That's
before.
Absolutely.
funny.
Yeah. And back to like that pipe there's times where you're like looking around, you're like, and you just go over to the back of your TIG and just bend it around like your TIG tank that's still hooked up to your welder because that's the radius you need,
That's the one there.
I spend so much time with like smaller scale stuff, looking for like the right pipe diameter to do something that I want it to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's
and
fun.
same with, dollies and stuff too. You can buy all these fancy dollies, but so many of them that we have is, it's a piece of I-beam that we just lopped off
Yep.
and ground it or built it up with weld and then ground it to the shape you need and then welded that to a pipe that you can put in the vise and because you needed it for one specific thing and then it goes in the drawer and then
Making
you've
your
got
own
it.
tools is awesome.
Oh,
Like, there's
absolutely.
always that's another lost art. Is everyone, and then we've got so many people making cool tools, so I get it. But at the same time, man, sometimes you just gotta, if you need something, you just make it.
Yeah. And, I'm super jealous of the guys that I follow on like Instagram that are like true blacksmiths.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
like, I'm going to make this beautiful polished like hammer
out of that chunk of steel.
yeah, exactly. And they just start working it and when they're all done and the wood's beautiful and there's, and sometimes there's like an inlay and,
Yep.
and here's just this amazing new, cause he needed to make a different style horseshoe or something, and
Right,
it's
right.
like this incredible hammer.
So, for your creative outlets, do you do anything outside of like metal fabricating and welding?
Yeah. So airbrush and pinstriping, I do a lot. Yeah.
I saw a video where you actually like said that sometimes you just love to get into pinstripe.
Yeah.
Like NHL helmets, yeah.
I'm sorry.
The NHL helmets.
Yeah, NHL and NC2A. Used to do a lot of hockey goalie masks, and
wow.
I did them for some pro teams, a lot of college teams, and that was always fun every year because those guys pretty much got freedom
Carte
to have
blanche.
whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because some of the guys, like I had one, he was UW Badger, he's from Sweden, and like, all right, what are you thinking? What do you want? Because most guys like, I want a Badger on this side, like state of Wisconsin over here, and picture my grandpa on the back, and what, like, all right, right on, cool, and metal flake and pinstriping and all sorts of stuff. This dude's like, I'd love a portrait of every player on my team.
Holy Toledo!
I'm like, that sounds amazing, but also like your season starts in like a month, right? Like, I've got like 8 of these to do, and like, no, we can't. How about we pick like your 3 best friends on the team? And actually, what we ended up doing on his was we went with like some legends, like Hall of Fame guys, right?
Okay,
and did them in like their famous pose, right? Like if you Google that particular guy, there's this
goalie
cool
pose,
where he's like with the stick or whatever. So we ended up doing that, but I mean, it's a super cool idea.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
And a goalie helmet isn't all that big, right? So
it's not.
Limited space.
Yeah, you're doing some postage stamps. But
I always am fascinated by those because it shows the personality of the goalie a little bit.
Oh,
like
100%.
Usually it's just a nameless, like faceless guy and goalie, but you get that mask, and they've got, whether it's from the city they're playing in, or their family, or their friends, or their interests, or whatever, they've got them.
Yeah. No, it was always fun, and some of them they really went into the like, I want to terrify people.
Yes.
And I was all about that.
Hell yeah.
Like, oh yeah. So like the one I did, it was all white, but I made it look like it was for one of the Badgers, Wisconsin Badgers. And I made it like it was like the top of the Badger's head is here and the the bottom.
Cool.
And it looked gnarly. And then when it was all like done, painted, I took red paint on a paint stick, and I just like did the flick. So it looks like blood splatter all over it. Like it was just
dope.
Oh, it was amazing. And then some of the guys are like, they want it to be a little more tuned down, but the guys are like, I want to terrify people. Like, yes, like, this is gonna be rad. Yeah,
hockey's probably the perfect sport for that.
100%. Yeah. But yeah, no airbrushing. Like I said, the pinstriping, and anything
kind of
creative,
artistic, like drawing.
Yeah. I do a lot of sketches on the stuff that, like we were just talking about, a couple minutes ago in our break there, where sometimes you just go by feel, and other times you draw it out. Most times I'll kind of sketch my idea, and it doesn't necessarily have scale or dimensions,
right.
But it's just like, you can kind of look at it and be like, in your head of how you're going to get there. Not necessarily the measurements, but just like, can I make that shape?
Yeah.
And then sometimes you're like, I'm getting a little carried away. That's going to be tough.
Right.
And you can scale it back. But yeah, a lot of sketches and just kind of pounding out ideas. One of the things that I always have one of the little notepads in my shirt pocket, because it might be in line at the restaurant
pops in your head.
Yeah, for lunch or something, wait in the drive-through and be like, and it's for me anyway. I don't know about yourself, but those are fleeting.
I've wasted so many of those in my life.
Yeah, and you'll get back and be like, "What was I gonna do? I can't."
And then if you think of it, it's like a worse version, and you're like, "Come on, this sounded awesome 5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
what
exactly.
happened?"
Yeah. So that's it's fun to.
So what's the new things technology-wise that really kind of find your interest? You mentioned 3D printing, which on the scale it sounds like y'all are using is pretty amazing to me. Anything else or anything like that?
Well, what we can do just in 3D scanning too, and then be able to translate that stuff is pretty great, because normally you just enter it in CAD by measuring, and where you can scan and start from there. So I mean, that's great. I don't personally utilize that. Some of the other guys do, but just having that capability is really great. But for my purposes, it's super old school technology, honestly, but in the fab shop, when you're going by feel, we've got a manual Bridgeport, and it's got, you can enter in, manually enter in shapes and dimensions and that sort of thing. And to be able to just like bust something out by hand, chuck it in the mill, and I want to airframe this or whatever, and be able to just knock that out. Like I said, that's super old technology.
Yeah.
But for a guy that grew up stick welding and gas welding and whatnot, like that's rad. And we'll leave the super technical stuff to the CNC guys, but just having that's great. But as far as brand new technology, we're 3D printing steel now. So like our horn buttons on our we have Ringbrothers steering wheels. We've got 3 separate ones, 2 different horn buttons. The horn buttons are 3D printed stainless.
Wow.
And they're just so rad. You can do more than you can do with machining, because you can get very intricate, very small. And this year, it's the first time we did it, but we made keys for all the cars. So essentially, take your regular key, and we 3D printed what would be the part you hold on to, right?
Yep.
3D printed with the name of the car on one side, our logo on the other side, and then slide the key in and bond it in place, and just that sort of thing. Like you couldn't make that.
No.
Like you couldn't even machine it because it's so intricate. Like on the Mustang, it's called Uncaged, and you look at that logo, like it's so small. I don't know that even an engraving tool could get that small, let alone to be able to recess by 30 thousandths or something. So to be able to do that and just have the idea of like, we should make key fobs.
Wow.
Like, cool, draw one and then print it. Like, you
usually gratification.
Yeah, no, it's great. So that technology is really exciting. But the prototyping, being able to, 3D print
Rapid prototype is.
Yeah, those exhaust tips. And
Has
then,
it kind of shortened the window for fabrication
absolutely
tasks sometimes?
Yeah. Well, and it did, because now that you have the technology, you think, boy, if I had to make this the hard way.
Right.
But in reality, you probably wouldn't have even thought to do it at all.
You would have left it,
because it would have been such a challenge that like the tooling doesn't exist to do it, so you wouldn't have even have thought of like the key fob thing, right?
Yeah.
Like you could have done something, but it wouldn't be that.
Yeah.
So that it speeds it up because we are able to do it, and it happens quick.
Yeah.
But without that technology, we probably wouldn't have done it in the first place.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally get that.
What's your favorite job you've worked on?
Well, Ennio last year, the 48 Chevy Loadmaster that we won Battle of the Builders with, that was a really fun build. That, I have a 47 Ford myself.
Nice.
So it's, that's similar body style, and that's kind of my jam.
Yeah.
So that was really fun to work with, and it was so out of the box and so different that there was no rules.
Right.
Like there really wasn't, like, how are we going to make this work? Like, just figure it out, right? And there was no blueprint or game plan on how to get from A to B on so many of the things. So you just kind of did one of these for a little while, and it kind of holds some stuff up, and it'd be like, yep, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And just being able to run with it, which that was super cool. This year, that Charger, that's the favorite for me of the three that we brought. It's a sexy car. Like it's a cool car. But yeah, overall, I mean, Ennio that was a real blast to build, because it had a million challenges.
Right.
Like we're doing stuff that isn't supposed to be done. Technology involved in it. That one had a transaxle, which we hadn't done before, with a torque tube that was exposed going through the cab, and like, how are we going to make that work? So we ended up doing it where the cab comes almost like a Volkswagen, where the cab could come off and it's split kind of not halfway up, but this far up. So you had like where the bell housing and stuff came through, you're able to take the cab off
Just
and
have access to everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was that kind of stuff of, like in the beginning, not sure, but you get going and like, wait a minute, this isn't like, how are we going to that when we can't get to that part? So then we're like, all right, we'll split the cab, and it's all that kind of stuff on the fly that happened that really breeds that creativity and really gets
thinking
you
outside of the box.
Yeah. It's it's one of those where you're laying in bed at night, like, how am I going to make that exhaust get through there, or whatever the case. And those notepad ideas are like, yep, here's an idea. And you come in the next day and figure it out. And that's always one of my favorite things, when you're just that invested in a project that it's really all you can think about. And that drives, a lot of us in the fab shop, that you come in the morning and we're doing the stand around, have some coffee before we get started. And you're like, hey, I was thinking we could do this, we could do that. And you're like, oh, I was thinking that too. And, and you kind of combine those ideas with, what everybody kind of thought about the night before, because we're all really kind of on the same page in there. And that makes it really cool too.
It's almost like a pre-shift meeting almost.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the same with, Jim and Mike and the guys in the fab shop. We all kind of tend to be basically on the same page as far as like what we like, what we think is cool.
Now that's hard to find.
It is. It's so cohesive, and it's such a beautiful environment for breeding creativity. And I've always been a big proponent that success breeds success. Creativity breeds creativity. If you surround yourself with creative people, it's going to up your creative game. And, aside from that, even going further, one of my really good friends gave me some great advice early on when I had my shop. And he said, don't be afraid to surround yourself with people smarter than you.
Yes.
You
don't have to be the smartest man in the room all the time.
Don't have to be.
You probably don't want to be.
No, and
Pretty sure I'm not.
you know, if you can allow that, then everybody succeeds, right? If you establish yourself as like, I have to be the smartest guy in the room, you're only going to go so high, right? But if you have people that like, you know, here's his expertise and here's his expertise, that all comes together, and it just makes such a great environment. And I think we have that. We
Right on.
You know,
That's
we really
super
do.
cool. I know with problem solving, early on, like once you hit a problem and it's frustrating, but then you get through that. Every time you do that, you get a little more confident. So I'm assuming now you see a problem and you're like, well, I'm gonna figure it out. It's just a matter of how.
Yep, 100%. You know, and that's one of the things that we say to each other pretty often. Like, how are we gonna do this? And you know, one of us would be like, I don't know, but we'll figure it out.
Exactly.
You know, you always figure it out, and you just have to remember that.
Yeah.
Like whatever the problem is, like it'll work out. If the only time it's not going to work out is if you quit.
Yep.
Right. And I feel that that's a value all the way through. If it's in starting business, if it's all going on out on your own, the only way it's not going to work is if you don't do it.
Yep.
If you do it and that's what you want to do, and you just set your focus as that's the goal, then it's gonna happen. If you give up halfway through, well, then you just answered your question, and it's not gonna happen because you just decided that. But if you just like, nope, this is gonna happen, then it's going to
manifest it.
Yeah, and the same in fabricating. You know, you run into these issues, and you're like, you know, yeah, it's a problem. Yeah, that doesn't fit right now.
It will.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
So we got to cut a hole here. It's just metal. Right?
I had a coworker once said, "No babies are gonna die. We're gonna be fine."
Yeah.
Let's keep pushing forward.
And not in this podcast.
Is there something you haven't worked on that maybe you would like to work on?
Well, I tell you what, I've worked on a lot of. I did a KitchenAid mixer for a 90-year-old woman once because she was watching Alton Brown's cooking show, and he has a pinstriped and flamed KitchenAid mixer.
That's awesome.
And she walked into my shop, and I got to tell you this. So she walked into my shop, and I had a bunch of buddies there who look like bikers, right? Like, and it's a bike shop, hot rod shop, and there's loud rockabilly music, and these dudes standing around looking like they do. And she walked in right past them, like it's nothing. Like, I grew up in the 50s, man. Like, you don't know where I've been.
Give a F.
Yep. Just walked right up to me, and she goes, "Are you the painter?" I'm like, "Yep." And she goes, "I want my mixer painted like Alton Brown's." Like, right on. So he did it, and it was awesome. All the way through, you know, sculptures and railings and these cars and stuff. So a lot of different things. But something I haven't put my hands on, which I think would be pretty rad, is something that flies.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, wow.
You know, if it's maybe it's not fabricating, maybe it's painting a World War II era fighter plane, or just like that.
I feel you on that.
That'd be cool, right? And I don't know that I would, like, what are you going to do? Like, I'm going to, you know, like French the door handle on the airplane. Like, probably not. But laying some cool paint or something would be awesome.
I early on, I helped certify the chromoly process at Chrysler because the instructor wanted to build an aircraft frame out of chromoly, so that was why he was having us do it in the Chrysler school. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
I don't know if it ever happened. He had passed away a few years ago, but yeah, that was cool. I've always thought building an airframe would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
I wanted to fly too, but time and expense has kind of bit me there.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, that's a cool frontier.
Yeah.
Those World War II era graphics are pretty cool.
No, absolutely. Pin-up girls on the side of the bombers and stuff, man.
Right.
Like,
Just a hot rod jet was so badass.
Yeah.
Just like, I don't know. Yeah.
You know, Mike LaValle was a
candy apple paint job
from Killer Paint. He kind of started the real fire look, right? And he did a helicopter, and that thing was so cool. And I remember because I was like at the beginning of Real Fire, nobody knew what it was. He had like just come out with it. And he did that helicopter, and I think that flew around LA, and it was like hundreds of people called that there was a helicopter on fire. And like, I mean, that's pretty awesome, right? Like you put that on a business card, like that's pretty rad.
Everyone thought this was on fire.
Yeah.
Hire me now.
It's a pretty good sales pitch for sure. But the other thing that I've always wanted to do, and I hope to get there someday still, is to have a forge at home.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You know,
yeah.
It doesn't have to be big, but just to like start, you know, really get back to the roots. Just start beating some metal, and making hatchets and knives, and
Nothing more like spiritual about just like fire and metal and nothing mechanized except for maybe a power hammer. But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
where it's at.
It's so rad watching those guys that, and the old timers that, they worked wherever in some foundry for 60 years, forging stuff. And then now they're retired and they're showing people how to do these skills. And
They've got a pretty good organization too, like where they travel around doing shows a few times a year, like big blacksmithing shows.
Yep. No, it's so rad, and there's something too, I think, even to watch that it's relaxing. He's making a bunch of noise, but there's something just that kind of brings you down.
Sounds right.
Yeah, it's just perfect. And, I get super jealous too of the guys that you see them on Instagram and TikTok where they're doing like their anvil and they're demonstrating like they'll drop a ball bearing on it and that thing will just sit there for like 30 seconds and barely losing height. And he'll go to like a, just a regular anvil from
cheap new one,
and
China.
it just go think.
Yeah.
And there it is. And like these guys have that set up with all the right hammers and they just make some incredible stuff. And that's beautiful. A skill I really want to try to hone someday.
I have a 1911 Trenton 139-pound anvil that I don't use for blacksmithing, although one day I will. But sometimes you just hit it with the hammer because it sounds so cool.
Yeah.
It's I mean, they're good for metal shaping too, so I do use that part
Killing
of it.
coyotes as well.
That's true too.
Oh, yeah.
They will kill
Effective.
coyotes very effective.
Very effectively.
Yeah.
I was thinking when we were going through Yellowstone, hoping the anvils were just flying out of the sky. This
Be
had
amazing.
Acme on them.
Yeah.
That'd be cool though.
Yeah. Throwing in the back of the truck.
Nope.
That'd be
Oh,
great.
yeah, I mean, especially if they're using vintage anvils to try to
Exactly.
kill coyotes.
Yeah, that's Roadrunner got fast real quick.
You know, with those anvils too, you watch the guys, and I had the fortunate experience of seeing it in person once at one of those demonstrations like you were talking about, where it was the master and his apprentice, and they were, they were speaking with the hammer, right? So in the cadence that he's hitting it,
It's a rhythm.
That he wants it turned a certain way, and 3 hit, and he would explain that, right? That 3 hits is flip it, 2 hits is everything meant something. So he'd be on the piece, for say 2 hits, and then he'd be off, but he would just keep going with that cadence on the anvil, and that was telling his apprentice his apprentice is holding the piece. So that was telling him what he needed him to do, and it was.
Well, that sounds like a time warp almost.
It's super rad. Yeah. It's really neat.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Ryan.
Absolutely.
For joining us.
Yeah,
It
pleasure.
was awesome.
Pleasure.
Josh,
Definitely.
thank you
Thanks
as
so much
well.
for
Awesome
having me.
to talk to you, Ryan.
Yeah, good to talk to you guys.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for Miller Electric for having us. Be sure you go to where you get your podcast, rate, review, subscribe. If you have a question for us, send it to us at podcast@fmamfg.org. That's it. I'm just looking to the Lord for help.
Ringbrothers, they're not hard to find. Google
Yeah.
Ringbrothers.
Look us up, Facebook, Instagram. Call the shop anytime. One of us
I'm
will
definitely
answer.
going to be visiting.
Yeah, no, love to have you. Love to have you.
Wisconsin's awesome. On that note, goodbye.
And good riddance.
The Fabricator Podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association, located in Elgin, Illinois. The show is hosted by Dan Davis and the staff of FMA Communications. The podcast is produced by Gareth Slager and recorded and edited with the help of Brandon Geyer. Sales support provided by Andy Flando. Additional production support by Elizabeth Gavin, Dana Weicker, Mary Diamond, Mike Owens, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.